Hi, I'm Mitch from Sonam International and welcome back to our Anaplan tutorial series. The most effective way for you to show large datasets that anybody can comprehend is through charts. That's why we wanted to show you the different types of charts in Anaplan and the most effective way to use them. Let's jump into it.
And here we are, back again with the Leprechaun Smoothie Company. You can add charts as a model builder or as an end user using the My Pages functionality. If you're not sure how to do that, you can watch our video on the new UX. The link is in the description down below. Now, let's start by taking a look at what is available to you when editing charts. When you press the pencil button to edit the chart, you will see a tab come up with three different options: Overview, Chart, and Context. On the Overview tab, you can view Designer, which lets you see the data that you're using for this chart. You can give your chart a title, a description, link it to a different page, and choose the chart type. On the Context tab, you have a Hierarchy filter, which lets you dynamically change the axis of one of your charts based on what's selected in the page. And then underneath that, you have all your context selectors for the chart. Think of the context selector as another dimension you can use to play with your chart. So, if we turn on the selector, you can see we're showing all zones at the moment, but we can change that to show whatever we want. For example, Germany, and see our billing volumes there. You can also see your context selectors for the entire page at the top of the page, as you can see here. The last tab is the Chart tab, which is different for every different type of chart. So we're going to go through that one by one for each type of chart. Now let's take a look at our first data set, our filling volumes by month. If we go to View Designer, you can see that we have it set up that we have our months on the columns, and then we have our line items in the rows. Finally, we have countries, or any other dimension you want, as a context selector. This type of data will be really good for column, bar, line, area, dot, and combination charts. Let's take a look at them now. Let's start with column and bar charts. Now, a bar chart is just a column chart flipped on its side, so we can cover both of these at the same time. Moving over to the Chart tab, you can see that there are quite a few different options. The first thing I want to look at is the series stacking option. You can choose between a clustered chart, a stacked chart, or a percentage chart. A clustered chart is good for comparing items against each other. A stacked chart is good for showing how multiple sections make up a whole and how it grows. And a percentage chart is just for seeing how a makeup changes over time. Think multiple pie charts next to each other. Now, also in the Series tab, you can change the color of your different items, but you can also change the axis of the items from left to right. With this dataset, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. However, if we were comparing different things, let's say sales to number of employees, you can see how the different scales could really show what's really going on. Under the Axis tab, you can add a title to the left axis, and under the Labels tab, you can choose where you want to put the legend, and then you can also choose whether to show your data labels. In this case, there's a bit too much going on, so it doesn't make sense. Let's look at a different type of chart now. Let's take a look at a line chart. A line chart is really good at showing changes over time, but not so great at showing off separate, isolated events. In Anaplan, a line chart has the same options as a column chart, except you can't choose between clustered, stacked, and percentage. You also get one extra drop-down, being the data drop-down, which says plot trailing zeros. This means, let's say, you only have actuals until August, rather than the line just dropping down to September, the line will just stop, only showing if there is data. The next type of chart we're going to look at is the area chart. Now, this is essentially a hybrid between the line chart and the column chart, as you can see here. Therefore, in the Chart tab, you can see that we have the data drop-down, where we can plot the trailing zeros or not, but then also under the Series drop-down, we have the option to show clustered, stacked, or percentage charts. The next chart I want to show you is a dot chart. Now this is essentially a line chart but without lines, only the dots. Under the Chart tab, you have all the same options that you did for the line chart. Now, all the types of charts that we've used so far have all been plotted on the same axis with the same data. Therefore, we're able to create a combination chart, combining all the different types of charts we've looked at. While this looks like a regular line chart at the moment, if we go to the Chart tab, you can see we can choose between line, column, area, and dot for each of our different series. There are lots of different things that you can do with a combination chart. For example, I'm going to put last year's values as an area, this year's as a column, and our target as a dot to see if we're reaching it. In this case, we aren't. Now let's move on to our next set of data, filling volumes by country. Now, if we take a look in the designer, you can see that we only have one column of data here, filling volumes. With this setup of data, you can create pie charts and donut charts in Anaplan. These charts are very good at showing what parts make up the whole. So, for example, you can see Germany makes up 14,000 of our filling volumes, and Australia makes up 21,000 of our chocolate 03 plastic filling volumes. If we head to the Charts tab, you have the option to bring out a slice of the pie, and then you can also go to the labels and show data labels and move the legend position. If we change the chart type from pie to donut, you can see that the middle of the pie is cut out to form a donut. That's about it. There's no changes to the Chart tab. Those are all the basic charts that you can build in Anaplan, but Anaplan also has different types of more specific charts that you can build. The first example of this that I want to show you is the Waterfall chart. Waterfall charts are really good at showing how increases or decreases help you get to a final result. For example, income and expenses to lead you to gross profit, or over time, such as with cash flow balance. If we take a look at our designer, you can see that you need one column of data having both your increases and your decreases right next to each other. Your final number needs to be your cumulative total, and if you have a starting value, like with a cash flow statement, that needs to be at the beginning. Looking underneath the Chart tab, you can change the axis name. You can auto-axis, which changes the scale of the axis, and then you can rotate the axis, making the waterfall chart a bar chart instead of a column chart. Under the Labels drop-down, you can decide to show your data labels if you so choose. I like how they look on this chart, so I'm going to leave it on. Underneath the Data drop-down, you have quite a few different options. As always, you can change the color of the chart, which I haven't actually done yet, so let's go ahead and change this to blue. Underneath the color options, you can suppress zeros, which will get rid of any zeros in your waterfall chart to streamline it. You can make the first item a total, such as if you were creating a cash flow statement, and then you can show intermediate totals, which means if you have subcategories, you can show the total change that they have there. Let's take a look at the next type of chart, the Gantt chart. This is very commonly used for project timelines, showing which tasks need to be completed when. If we take a look at the data behind the chart, you can see that we have three columns. We have our start date, our end date, and our milestone date, if we want to include those on the chart. All your steps are as rows. Under the Charts tab, you have a few different options. First of all, you can set whether you want to show milestone dates or not, which in this case we do. If you go to the Series tab, you can change the color of your series. And then under the Labels tab, you can decide whether to show tooltips or not. Tooltips make it so that if you hover over a specific point, it will show you the start date, end date, or milestone date connected to that point. If you turn it off, then you can't hover over the values anymore. Let's move on to the final and probably most complex type of chart in Anaplan, the scatter bubble chart. The scatter bubble chart takes two data sets and plots them on different axes so you can see the relationship between the two to see if there is a correlation or not. The bubble size is a third data set that you can add to compare that as well. Looking at a data set, you can see three columns. The first column will be the x-axis, the second column the y-axis, And then the third column is the bubble size. Our dataset shows that there is generally a strong connection between our two variables. However, there are some outliers, for example, New York, which is underperforming compared to the other plants. In the chart tab, there are 4 different drop-downs. Under data, you can choose to add the bubble size as a variable. Under series, you can change the color of your bubbles. And then under axis, there are a lot of different options. First of all, you can change the background grid to only show vertical or horizontal lines. Then you can add plot lines to your graph. This can be a good way to visually segment your data. For example, I can add a plot line at 270,000 to show which of our plants are super plants, that being Toronto and Los Angeles. Finally, you can play with scale to change the scale of your axis. For example, if I want the minimum to be 100,000, you can see my graph automatically adapts to adjust for that. Everything I did on the x-axis, you can also do on the y-axis. The next setting you can play with is the trend line. This really highlights whether there is any correlation between your two variables. There are different trend lines you can create, being linear, polynomial, exponential, and logarithmic trend lines. For our dataset, a linear trend line works best, so I'm going to leave it at that. Finally, you can play with the labels on your dataset. Tooltips mean you can hover over any bubble you have. Data labels show you what the actual bubbles mean, and then the legend is at the bottom, which you can also remove. Those are all the different chart types in Anaplan. However, there is one extra pseudo chart that you can use, being Sparklines in a KPI card. KPI cards are used to show off a specific value that you want to pay attention to. However, if you go to the configuration and go to the KPI tab, you can see that you can enable or disable a sparkline if you have a summary selected. In this case, we are summarizing all over the year, showing 2020, not just a specific month. If we go to the context selector, we can play around with this just like any other card or chart. So you can decide to add a selector for a plant or for a specific product SKU in our case. So we can see how our chocolate 03 plastic SKU is performing in Los Angeles. And on our KPI chart, we'll have the volume for the full year in the top left-hand corner, and the line itself will have the data labels throughout the month. Those are the different chart types and datasets needed for them in Anaplan.
If you have any questions about what we went over in the video, feel free to leave a question in the comment section down below. Subscribe to be notified whenever we release a new video, and follow us on LinkedIn for more useful content. I hope you like this video. I'll see you next time.